What's up, everyone? Welcome to the 33rd episode of Super Brain Radio, the third installment of Chapter 7, Misfiring, where we're covering key areas of neurology that can go astray from where we'd ideally want them to be based on quality of life, habits, routines, recent success to failure ratios associated with that behavior or motor pattern, so on and so forth. And today we're covering underperforming. I think this one makes sense based on what we can talk about with the vagus nerve and the hypothalamus after the last two episodes. And more importantly, it's something that's kind of near and dear to my heart because in my personal athletic endeavors, I have been what I would consider successful. I've been top 5 in the world. I've come in clutch and won big shows, but I can't tell you how many times I've taken second by less than 2 points in strongman. And because of slight little slip-ups neurologically, that put me in a position where I wasn't capable of performing. And it goes far beyond just feeling the right things. In fact, we can actually be pretty scientific. And we're also going to delineate between the management of performance and planning a performance because they're very, very different. For example, planning a performance is merely looking at biological data points and making progressive predictions week to week to lead the horse to water, if you will, and allow the athlete to adapt in a manner that fosters sports performance increases. Now, when we talk about the management of performance, it's a far more encompassing term. Management of performance includes in the moment physiology. So, talking about what's happening in the 30 seconds prior to something, the intra portion of something, which often only lasts a couple of seconds, but it's far more definable than you would maybe think. And furthermore, what is the body's response to the participation in sport at a high level? All of these things need to be collectively combined with planning a performance, as well as monitoring sports psychology and actual sport variables, like if you're starting 30 minutes earlier than you anticipated, if there's outside variables like high levels of wind, or if you're participating in a different temperature or time zone, or maybe you've been competing for several days in a row. Strongman's known for having 3 to 5 day competitions at varied levels in the past. So all these things together are what management of performance is really talking about. And that delineation is important. It's not that planning doesn't matter, but planning is all about the biology. And what we're going to start to understand is it's enzymes that stop biology. So the mismanagement of planning and biology's natural response and adaptation curves. It's really all that is to periodize something to get better. But it's athletes that stop athletes. Meaning, in the moment physiology and management of it is something I've seen to foster better success and ameliorate more mistakes than anything else. And it doesn't go too far beyond analyzing previous data points, monitoring heart rate and oxygen levels, and having an inherent understanding of the energetics behind the sport they're participating in. The reason I'm starting with this is because when we start to talk about underperforming, which can even correlate to school studies, it can correlate to meeting a quota for a month. Anything that has to do with your actual participation yielding something can be described as under, over, or on point performance. And if we're going to talk about what does it mean for our brain, spinal cord, electrical communication system to have some type of impediment that is taking away from your previous abilities to perform. So if we're going to define underperforming quickly, it's doing something that you could do better. It's not being able to optimize your capabilities. It's being inhibited. And what we're really talking about is not having the opportunity for your previous adaptations to be showcased. This is a far different word than overperforming, because overperforming is going to have a drastically different and almost superimposed mirror image of what underperforming is. Overperforming, which involves rising to the occasion, is going to have a completely different neurological demand. So it's not that jumping from middle of the pack to the top of the pack is significantly more demanding from an energetic standpoint, meaning you're burning more energy or anything like that. In fact, a lot of sports, if you're better, you tend to waste less energy. But what we really see is the demands are different. When you see someone go from an underdog to a top dog, these demands from a neurological perspective are changing. But to bring things back quick, we are talking about underperforming today. Now, the first thing we need to encompass with underperforming is that being able to perform and maximize your skills in the first place involves hitting a perfect little threshold. Kind of like if you're in my age group, late 20s, the deer hunter game from when we were kids. There's that green zone in the middle and the red zones that go around it. You have a small window, and maybe as you become a better athlete and better management of your performance, that window might get bigger, but you have to hit it just right. If you are underperforming, it means you've missed that green curve. Missing below is going to involve the vagus nerve being overactive and detracting from the hemodynamic, meaning blood and stuff within it, like hormones and nutrients and all that, is not going to be fostering sports performance by sending those to muscles and working tissue. It's going to be going to your heart, lungs, and stomach, which you actually don't want prior to performing. Furthermore, if you're in a scenario when you realize you are under-aroused and not ready, this is when fear and hesitation set in. This has to do with our amygdala being turned on and not being able to interpret the scenario as something where you have a high likelihood of success. Thus, it chooses a defense and fear and hesitation perspective to protect ourselves from what it sees as imminent failure. And if you're a sports performance athlete, you should probably rewind those last 20 seconds and start to remind yourself that the opportunity to perform can be done in the presence of fear. Fear means some part of your brain is scared because of the failure percentage. You do not have to care about that to do what you need to do. You can perform in sports regardless of the predictions that your biology or anyone else may be making. That's an important thing to understand when we talk about maybe issues with the hypothalamus that have to do with underperforming now. When we have this fear-based response, you're probably going to interpret it as, I need to, in fact, become more aroused, more excited to get into this green zone if you're somewhat of an intuitive athlete. However, the arousal that's going to come from norepinephrine, dopamine, epinephrine, and all these cool electrical cholinergic cascades that we've referenced in previous episodes are now going to be just enhanced by this amygdala, fear, and hesitation-driven state. So now, in fact, we're going to have this increased heart rate, which is going to contribute to anxiety or apathy, depending on how you feel about yourself. But regardless, there is no scenario where you can now hit your mark. Which brings us to flipping the tables on underperforming and ameliorating mistakes. And what we now start to truly understand is that all that needs to be done from the athlete's perspective to avoid underperforming is to be mindful enough that they can still carry out their sports skill. Now, that's a generally vague sentence in the sense of mindfulness to a scenario can be very, very different, as well as what the optimal sports performance strategy may be. And as you break that sentence down, it still yields true to a pretty far degree that I'm happy with, but you'll start to understand that stopping underperforming is nothing more than allowing yourself to be in the place you've trained yourself to be.